You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Keshia. Welcome everyone to the Road to Wisdom podcast. Today we have the beautiful Kim Sexty in. She's going to share with us her 3 birth experiences, probably just briefly with the first 2, and then her 3rd birth experience, which was an unassisted
home birth.
Some people call them the F word. But it was beautiful and yeah, something that me and Chloe like hearing because, well, I force you to listen to. I say you like hearing.
I do like hearing them. I'm all about it. I just have a lot of questions about things. I'm like, yeah, but what if? Because this happened to me. I'm definitely flattening out my experiences through these conversations as well. So it's very helpful.
And that's the thing, right? So obviously, Keshia, you're a friend of mine, and I knew about the conception of this podcast before it was, even birthed. And so we spoke about it and you're like, yeah, I'd love to have you on, blah, blah. And then you've gone out and done the thing and it's great. And then a month or 2 ago, well, you were like, yeah, can you hurry up and come on the podcast? We need a really boring birth story. And I'm like, what? She's like, to balance out all these controversial topics that we're just, and I laughed, but I'm also like, yes, please. Can we continue to share more stories like this so that these births, these unassisted home births, these free births, these whatever you want to call it, are no longer considered extreme or too rogue or too out there, that they actually feel very nondescript, very uneventful, very just like, oh yeah, she just birthed a baby.
Normal, boring, free birth.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
But and that for the most part, if we lived in a society that we didn't have medical systems and we didn't have hospitals and we didn't have medical assistance, the majority of births would still be just normal,
very uneventful,
boring.
That's how I described Rosie's birth. Just very uneventful and very normal.
Yeah, and I'm
just
the
at
same.
home, and then my midwife helped me put my pants on, and then I went to sleep. It's very great.
Well, yeah, when you were go briefly into the first 2, and then I'm like, Janda's my 3rd baby is the most. I'm like, I don't really have much to say about that. It was pretty standard, but
standard.
Yeah, but so I really really appreciate this because, as you both know, these stories are being censored, which is bullshit because it doesn't empower the woman at all, and it normalizes intervention and power trips and all those things. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you for coming on and sharing with us because, these are the stories that we want to surround ourselves in and just bathe in, especially in the phase of life that me and Chloe are in. So bring it on. All right, so let's begin. Let's begin with your initiation into motherhood. So
my initiation into motherhood was not planned, was not conscious. Although there was a layer of that. It was, I'd just been dating my now husband. We'd been dating for 4 months. Had our first holiday.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Really? Yeah. And I think it relates so much to the birth I had with her, and I really want to speak to that. But yeah, we went on our first holiday to Bali together, and we're like, okay, so we're a serious couple now. And then we fell pregnant. But it was, as I'm sure you know, really challenging because we had to understand each other. Real quick. And shit changed real quick. I went from being this real fun, easygoing girlfriend to being, this boring girlfriend on the lounge, couldn't do much. And he changed. He changed a lot. And yeah, this was a theme for us in our relationship. But I really love the energy that we're bringing to more rites of passage and awareness for women. But I think my husband's a really great example of the lack of support for men going through a huge rites of passage too. And effectively, when we first started dating, he was like this. I was a yoga teacher at the time. He was like this fit, healthy yogi that would practice yoga every day, was meditating, very aware. I fell pregnant. It sent him in a spin, and effectively he turned into the complete opposite of that and was an alcoholic, smoking durries, severely unhappy, was no longer surfing, barely, no longer doing yoga. And so I'm like going through my own journey myself, but also being like, holy fuck, this is the
What
man.
is happening to you?
This is the man I'm meant to be having. I don't think this is going to work. And so I was also dealing with a lot of doubt too. And it obviously played out in the birth I had for my first daughter, who's Taya. And it was just a real, I don't know, how do I want to segue into that? But yeah, we were effectively fighting as I was initiated into birth. And that's the energy I took into the birth room, and it was felt in my body. I was a scared little girl who was holding on like this, like my body was just not opening up.
In all that, before we get into the birth, did you do, like, coming from a background in yoga, were you able to look into birth, and like, did you do any of the classes or research?
We did a She Births course, which I'm now friends with Nadine, the owner of that, and that was really great, but that was enough for me.
Yep.
Everyone prepares differently, and I'm very much someone who, like, the less I know, the better. I really like to wing things, and I felt like reading more got me more in my head, and actually I wanted to be more in my body. But I definitely, it was funny because I didn't want to read the books, but I also was severely lacking any sort of support. And that's why I'm so passionate about supporting friends who are going through this rites of passage to bring in the wisdom of the women who have been there before. And so I was going into it very naive.
I think I can relate to that. But I did way less than a She Births course.
I did absolutely nothing. Like, I was just like, all right, well,
I guess it's happening.
yeah.
I don't want to know. It sounds scary.
Yeah.
It's just burying my head in the
Well,
sand.
I mean, it was essential for us to kind of come together and to feel like I had his support, but also the narrative I got told about birth was less than ideal. And so I really was aware of that. Like, my dad continues to say, your mother was like the exorcist when she was giving birth. Like, it was horrific.
Yeah.
And so I really I was aware that I had to kind of unravel that slightly. Didn't. It took a few pregnancies to do that, but yeah, I definitely had work to do in that arena.
So how then did you know you were in labour? How did that start?
It's so funny. So my bestie, who lives on the other side of the world, just so happened to be here in Australia, and I remember saying to her, she was over, and I'm like, God damn, this is the 5th time I've got to change my undies. Like, I keep weeing myself. And she's like,
I think you have a baby.
yeah. She's like, I don't think you're weeing yourself, babe. I think that's your water's leaking. And again, I had this idea that even though I did this course, that you're meant to have this big gush. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And I continued to go about my day. That it was Christmas Eve. Had a fight with my husband. He went to bed. I was extremely emotional. It was a full moon and I was in labour, just didn't know it. And we lived on the coast at the time, so I took myself on this big, beautiful coastal walk and was like chanting and crying and all those things. And then I was watching the Hunger Games and I started to get like period pain. And a ritual for me on Christmas Day is to ocean swim. And I remember thinking, oh, I don't think I'm meant to swim in the ocean. Because remember back then I was still like good little maiden who was like, what are the rules, And I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm meant to swim. I should probably check. So I called the hospital and they're like, oh, yeah, how long has that been happening for? Your water's kind of, and I'm like, oh, a few days now. And they're like, okay, well, just come in and we'll check. And so I woke my husband up at the time, was not met with a very, like, he was not happy about that. And I'm painting him in a very bad light. Like
Jesse's actually a really nice guy, everyone.
Yeah, we're married now, like 3 kids in. We've both done some healing.
We're going to get there. We're going to turn this around, I promise.
Yeah, so he's not so evil.
Also, Jess won't be listening to this. So
He's not going to be listening to a birth story. But just in case like other people are like, she should have left him from the start. Yeah. And so we were, driving to the hospital, and I was fucking in my head, I'm like, fuck you, I'm going to be a single mum. I'll bring this baby into the world without you. And he's probably still drunk and shitty at me and like driving us to the hospital. And I felt safe there. Like they checked. Oh, I arrived at the hospital and there were 2 girls I went to school with. And I'm like, hi, I haven't seen you in a while. Check out my yoni. And it was fine because I'm a very open person, but that was funny. And then they're like, listen, you're like 1 centimetre, you can go home. But it was Christmas Day and I actually felt safe in the hospital. It felt like the only sure thing I could cling to, as opposed to all the chaos of the day, everyone in my family making a big deal out of it. In hindsight, I wish I didn't, because it just made the mind game of birth so much worse. But I ended up staying there and then getting the birth process taking its course. And it was intense. And from, I think, 2 centimetres, I was purging at both ends. Oh. Obviously had a lot of shit to clear out of my system. And that went on for a really long time, what felt like an eternity. And I remember begging them at one point and being like, check me. And they're like, oh, we don't need to check you. I'm like, check me. How far? Because I was like so exhausted. Didn't prepare. Like I bought some clothes, but I didn't think to eat or hydrate or anything. I was just, again, this new little girl, a young little girl going to hospital, thinking I'm getting something checked out, I wasn't yet prepared for, I'm having a baby. And so, I did like my dad talked about my mum being the exorcist, and I was like that from the get-go, just like and but from really early on. And so when they checked me and they were like, you're not going to be happy with what we're going to tell you. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you've dilated 1 centimetre. And I'm like, I'm fucking out. I'm out. Like, I'm not good at maths, but I know that I can't do that. Like if that's meant to go on for days, nah. And my beautiful midwife by then arrived, because it was Christmas morning, but a bit more of a reasonable hour. So it was like 8 a.m. or something. I was there at midnight. And again, that's just such a reflection of how scared. Like I just see this little like energetic figure in my body, this poor little girl just being like, oh my God, like holding on for dear life. And my cervix was a reflection of that. Just like, nope, not ready. I'm scared. I don't know what's going on. I don't have support. And so, and my beautiful midwife was trying to convince me. She's like, you wanted a natural labour. You wanted a natural birth. And I'm like, I don't fucking care. And so I waddled back to the out of the hospital, the birthing suite, and into the hospital room, and begged for an epidural. And upon reflection, I'm so grateful for that. I actually don't think my body would have opened up because I was so petrified. And so when I think about the options, it was either I get the epidural where I'm kind of somewhat disassociated from my body and the drugs do the work to relax me, or I continue to brace and hold on, which will eventually lead to them going and cutting me open. And so, I'm grateful for the way that played out. And, and then that allowed me to sleep, me to eat, my husband to sleep and sober up, which, I mean, he probably doesn't even, but I remember thinking that, like, this is good. This is good. And then she came out into the world on Christmas Day. And it was love at first sight. Like you guys will know, it's like I've seen you before. Hi, baby girl. But it,
Oh my God.
yeah.
I'm getting emotional.
You get to have that again. I know. But it also did like somewhat awaken this because, you know, like I had that you're the love of my life, and I will protect you at all costs. And, you know, the stuff with my husband and I, Jess, my partner, didn't automatically go away. It was still there, and he was still drinking a lot. And I mean, it's in this culture, it wasn't a lot, you know, it was just accepted. But I knew, and I knew it had a control over him, and I knew it shifted him, and I knew the intention behind it was not healthy. And so it did awaken that lioness of like, looking
You're
at
not feeling safe, secure, like you need to jump into this unnatural mode. Like non-feminine mode. It's like hardened.
It was more just like looking at her and being like, I will fucking protect you at all costs. I do not care what that looks like. You are my priority, not anyone else or anything else. And yeah, it was a beautiful thing to awaken, but I still, as I moved on to my second pregnancy, I still very much felt like a maiden. I only feel like I was activated into full mother energy with my third. I felt like I was still a maiden as a mother of one and then two kids for years, which I don't know whether you can relate to
I
at
can
all.
relate
but
to that.
yeah, I mean, we were like, you were the same age as me, right? When you had Willow. So it's not super young, but it's also like.
But like also, I think there is a cultural aspect of when you go into, like it is like culturally, I felt that I was quite young still. And there's an aspect there of when you go like the motherhood looked tainted from where I was pre-motherhood. It looked like not just stressful, but almost lazy. Like it wasn't like before, and this was before I was a mum, but it like I kind of judged it. And I think because my own mother held those judgments as well, like being just a mum was definitely not enough. And it wasn't, so like to do it, like while I always had, well, not always actually, that would be a lie to say, but when I met Togger, he had said that he wanted kids, and that was the first time that it had it, like, you know, I was like, oh, okay. And that's the first time I really considered having children. And then it, you know, 6 years into our relation, or 5 years into our relationship, I was like, well, if we're going to do it, I don't want to be an older parent. I want to like be young. My parents were young. It's what I want. But yeah, there was still this thing of like, I don't know. There was always like little things at school where no one at my school was like, oh, excited to start a family. Like you're excited to start a career. And if you were a young person going into wanting to have a family, it was like frowned upon somehow. It was kind of like a lesser state of
Honestly
being.
was. I can relate.
Yeah.
I remember up until like I was almost giving birth, I was trying to do work in my degree.
Yeah.
How old were you, Chloe?
I was 25 when I got pregnant with Bird.
Yeah.
And I was like mid-degree. And I was like, well, this is such a failure. I can't believe that I'm not going to be able to get this done before I've had a baby. Like this is not going to be, people are going to be super judgmental. And even after I had her, I was like, oh, I'll try and sign up for a semester. I'll try and at least do like 3 subjects. I'll try and do this because like, obviously it's important because like, what am I going to do? I can't just be a mom.
Yeah. And I think there's a conditioning there that you
100%.
hold on to your maiden.
But it doesn't
like
feel right. It's not like, oh, I need to prioritize that. I need that. It's like, I can't wait for that. It's more like, it's more like
there's a division within yourself.
Yeah, it's like, it's definitely a conflict. It's like, I don't really want to do it, but it's it's expected of me.
As opposed to what you're doing now.
As opposed to like, wow, look at that baby right there in front of me, which is 100% my priority and nothing else.
Yeah. And that's beautiful too. But as opposed to what you're doing now, you're doing the thing, but the energy in which you approach it is differently. It's like, no, because this is creatively fulfilling for me, and it actually makes me a better woman and a better mother, as opposed to feeling like you've got to prove
ourselves,
prove yourself
as women.
I don't know, I don't really have the words for it, but there is like this holding on to your maiden to being a maiden, to being able to go out all the time. And that's what me and Toka did. Like 4 days postpartum, we went out for lunch. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you went out.
No.
They actually went on a weekend bender.
4 days postpartum. No, but like we did. We went out for lunch. It was Toka's birthday. We went to a pizza place and we had Willow in a little baby bassinet and everyone was like, oh my God, cute baby. I'm like, don't breathe on her. I know though. But you know, it was 4 days postpartum. There's no way in hell I would think that. Like now I'm prepping. I'm like,
wouldn't do that.
I was the same, but it was a different, like I was, so I lived on the coast opposite like this beautiful coastal walk, and 5 days postpartum I was like walking, but it wasn't this thing of like I need to get my baby body back, or it was more like I'm a fucking miracle and I created this and I want to show it off. And so I'd be like, hey, like I'm the only woman who's birthed a baby before. Like, look what I did. I made this and she's perfect. She's better than all these other babies. Like just so rose-colored glasses.
can relate. Absolutely can relate. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely had that energy. But also for me, like, yeah, the only person I had prior to my baby was my best friend, but she was on the other side of the world. So I didn't really feel like I had any mothers around me to kind of lead the way and not put me in my place, but give me guidance. I'm like, oh, you don't want to be munching on celery sticks and raw carrots after you've just given birth, you know? So I felt really lost.
Yeah.
I think so many of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
So many. Even like pregnancies following the first. I could still relate to that.
Totally.
For sure.
And I think now we're at this interesting point where we've got so like a new mum has so many beautiful resources, podcasts, books. Like even when I think back to what we had 8 years ago, like so different. Nothing.
I didn't even know you could do a home birth. Like I really just thought that was for the proper
Total
backyard
lunatics.
hippies who didn't shave their legs or their armpits.
Nah, look at you.
You really tick those boxes, girlfriend.
I do. I feel like I'm going into an archetype.
I shaved my armpits today. I'm like, Keshia, we're not like this.
No, I'm down for all. I am down for all. It's really more out of being lazy. But and you know, testing my husband a little. Do you still love me now? Do you? No, but I oh God, I've lost my train of thought. We derailed that.
No. You were talking about thinking that home birth was for hippies.
Yeah. And like I just never in my wildest dreams would I have ever like I didn't even Google home birth because I was just like, no, that's not a thing. You go to the hospital to birth a baby. And yeah, but like, you know, I mean, again, we'll share it one day. Talk about it in my home birth.
You see me too.
I know. But like I do talk about how, you know, in the back of my mind, I was like, I like just hate hospitals. So if this baby just wanted to like pop on out, because I had heard of stories of people, you know, accidentally birthing in their cars and stuff. I'm like, well, if I was accidentally in the bath and baby just popped out, sweet. Yeah, but again, this is all stuff that we like the resources. Well, they were probably there, but you really had to search for it.
Yeah,
so,
you totally.
Or be
I remember
privileged enough to be able to afford it. Like we had a private midwife from the first baby, and she was like, "Are you interested in home birth?" And I was like, "I'm a bit too scared for that right now. Maybe next one."
Yeah,
but that's not available for
a lot.
That's like you have to hunt, and you might be lucky even if you can get her that she's available, you know. So the resources they're slim pickings.
Totally. But what I was going to say, like the resources are there now, but I don't think it penetrates on that like deep connection level for the young mum who's wandering around pregnant, going for walks, listening to a podcast, like great information, but it still feeds here and not the heart of really feeling held and supported. And so that's what I'm wary of when I see young women who are pregnant, like of how can we bring more of that like deep connection in?
Yeah, and like that it comes person to person. That's a really good point to make.
Yeah. And I mean, the mothers group that I did after my daughter was like the best thing ever because I had that. And so, yeah.
That's so valid because I feel like that really resonates for me. I could listen to a million magical rebirth stories or, you know, looking into things because I've personally got I'm not worried about free birthing. Happily I've more or less done it, and not had, like any interventions or scans. I'm cool with that. But it's more like afterwards is where my trauma comes from with having babies who need care after. So I feel like that's so true. It's hearing it and knowing it, but then feeling like you can really trust that is a total different thing, and then walk the path and totally embody it all.
Totally. And also Keshia was such a great guide for me in that. Like I really do, I credit you. No, truly I do. And we'll get to Janda's birth, but like you really reminded me that I can play this out however I want, and I can do it in the system, but do it my way. And so, yeah, like I say free birth because I don't know, fucking unassisted home birth's a bit of a mouthful. But like to the hectic, pure free births, they would poo-poo me because they're like, oh, you did, or like if we got into semantics. But yeah, like I used certain things that worked for me, and I didn't for others, but we can go into that. But yeah.
Maybe we do like a brief little Nashi's conception, pregnancy, birth.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, like we didn't plan him. He just happened, and
we're sitting with another extremely fertile unit over here.
Yeah, he happened, and I think for him, I think it's what we experience in the birth is so connected to the personality of the baby. I don't know whether you feel that at all, but like for me, Nash is quite sensitive and feels things, and I was just so emotional. Like all my things were coming up, and I knew to explore them. I didn't know I knew better than to push them down or to dismiss them. And so even the slightest little whispers, I learned to pull at that thread and unpack them, and they were necessary for Jess and I to come together and heal. So poor guy, he got everything, all my concerns, all how I hate him, all how I question our relationship, all these sorts of things, but they were bubbled up to the surface for me to heal, and it brought us together. And his birth, Nash's birth, was the most magical. And after I was like, oh my God, now I know why women want to do this a million times, because it was just magical. Like this spontaneous, the waters didn't break. He was actually born on call, like in the sack. But I knew to pre-labor at home. I was set up in a beautiful home. I was feeling more stable in my relationship. I felt very heard. I didn't necessarily, this birth was navigating if he could step up to support me in the way that I wanted. But for the point I was at, I felt heard and I felt seen, and we made love when I was birthing, and that was a very spontaneous, organic thing. It wasn't like, I'm birthing, make love to me now so we can kick things on. It was
I've done that, by the way.
Which sure, but like it was
Your
just
husband's not an object.
It was just a beautiful, or like he was attracted to me, and it was just, and I credit us making love during labor as being the reason his birth was so beautiful. And it's such a contrast to Taya, where I was petrified and holding on, embracing, and my body was a reflection of that, to making love, feeling wet, feeling held, feeling seen, feeling open. And he just came out. Like we went to the hospital, because I lived in a boxy apartment in Bondi back then. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to like scream the house down. It just doesn't feel private to me. But I did all the labor at home and literally just transitioned in the car. Went there, no vomiting, no spewing. And I went there and I just did one, I'm going to be sick. And then I was like, oh, no, not. I'm like, I'm just going to go to the toilet. Went to the toilet thinking I was about to wee. Again, no like huge diarrheas or anything. And when I sat on the toilet, I let out this like guttural, animalistic heave kind of, sound. Roar. The sound.
Yeah.
And they were just like, you're not going to the toilet, you're having a baby, hop in the pool. And I'm like, oh, okay. And 3 pushes, and I didn't push. He
Fetal ejection reflex.
Yeah. I feel weird saying that.
Just ejects from you.
Yeah, and 3 he came out and he was, born in his sack, and it was all beautiful. And it was incredible. I think what led me to change the story was the birth was beautiful and amazing and undisturbed. It was the afterbirth where I felt a bit like, ugh, get out of my space. Like they rushed me out of the pool, and then the doula was there. She met us at the hospital. She kind of didn't do anything, but she was there like in my face, like, you did it. And I'm trying to bond with my baby, whom I didn't have that initial. With Taya, I was like, hi, we've had lifetimes before. With Nash, I was like, oh. And I mean, now that I look back on it, shock definitely played a part in that, because his birth was just so quick. I was still in shock. So I was still kind of coming down from the heavens. But so I was really trying to like deep eye gaze with him and connect him to me. And this doula's in my face. And then the nurses are like, ready for your vaccinations now? And I'm like, oh my God. Like it just felt so intrusive in that way. And that's what I was like, that hospital birth was really great and beautiful, but I didn't like that, and I want to change that. And that was my driving force for wanting to do it at home after. But it was such a beautiful birth because my energy was different. And I think that's really important.
It speaks volumes.
It does. And I think when I've had so many friends who I've kind of held through their birthing process, and I'm like, don't judge like the decisions, or don't guilt yourself into how your birth played out, because how was your energy in that time? Like, were you held? Were you supported? Did you, that all plays out in your body.
And we don't know what we don't know. Like
Totally.
you're in that phase of life at that time, and you do the best with the resources you have. Like it's just not, I think even you listen to the crunchiest of free birth, like hardcore advocates, and they'll, they still say like, you can't know what you don't know, and you can't research what you don't know to research, or like you can't blame yourself for not being where you are at today back then. It's
and your experience leads to your evolution. Exactly. So because of that, where I did not like that experience, I was like, I'm going to do better next, and it brought awareness to that, and so then I chose differently. So
sometimes it takes multiple children together. I feel like it's just one after the, you take what you can, and then you're like, oh, next time I'm going to do that differently. Like it's taken me, this will be my fifth, to be like, I don't want anyone around me. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to.
But you want me there. So.
This one, she's persistent.
I'm pushing it.
She was still, so, okay, to give everyone some background, your fourth baby, Poet, your youngest in this moment, my youngest baby, Janda, they're a week apart, right? Something like that, very close.
I know how this story is going.
She was still pushing me. She's like, I'll photograph your birth. And I'm like, babe, no,
go home. You won't be there.
Yeah. And she's like, no, I can do it.
I'm like waddling around.
She's obsessed with birth.
I remember when you first moved up here, a little bit of background for everyone, could bore you to tears, apologies. But when you first moved up here and we were hanging out down the beach, you're like, I think I might be pregnant. And I was like, I'm a birth photographer. And I wasn't pregnant at that stage, but me and Toga were trying.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was totally just like, yep, I'm
going to be there.
Yeah. And then we're like, oh, we're pregnant together. And I was like, I could still do it.
Oh no, I think that was the baby I lost actually before Janda. But yeah, I remember when I said that, you were like, I want to be pregnant.
Yeah.
And then you kept pursuing, and I had to really be like, it was a great insight into you and how much you think you can do it all.
Nothing has changed.
And I do it all. So.
You do. And I'm very grateful for this baby shifting things. I got so excited when I saw the other podcast where you were like, meal trains. I'm like, yeah. But anyway, she still tried to photograph my birth. I'm like, babe, you will be in labor.
I'm pretty sure you had Rue as a newborn, and you were like, so I'll be at Rosie's birth. And I was like, No.
Yeah, I was really pushing that on you too.
I was like, no.
This is actually how I make my friends. I just like seek out pregnant
Insert
women
them.
and be like,
Insert
I'm going to
yourself in
be at your birth, taking photos of your vagina. Just
So how far apart are you guys?
Probably like a week.
maybe 2. Yeah.
1 to 2. 10 days I calculated by your date.
Yeah, but because I think I'm ahead and my babies hang out a bit longer and yours babies like to come a little
bit
earlier.
earlier, so-
It could be the same day. Who freaking knows? Like,
And she'll still want to come to my bed.
I'll be like,
I'm in labour, I can make it. No
I'll
love.
drive, it's fine. We've joked about being in the pool together.
It's like a birthing tent. It happened.
Why not?
Oh my gosh.
The things we can do. Oh, okay. Let's move on because now it's our normal, boring, free birth. Normal, boring, free birth. Sorry.
Very uneventful birth. Yeah, I mean,
You moved up here.
so we moved up here and fell pregnant again accidentally. No, that was like, we'd fallen pregnant accidentally prior to Janda and we still didn't know whether we wanted to have it and then whether we wanted to have another baby. And then obviously I felt a baby in my womb and I'm like, oh my God, of course I do.
Mm-hmm.
Lost her. And so then when I fell pregnant again, it was semi. We're like, okay, we're going to do this. And so it was semi-planned. And I was like, great. I no longer live in an apartment. I know I can birth. I don't have any, health issues. And I live in a beautiful rainforest home, like, yes, home birth. So Keshia, you were really like, when I think, a very casual but mentor for me because I was like, oh yeah, I'm pregnant, I'm going to do home birth. And you're like, right. But what I soon became aware of was like, home birth is painted as this ideal, right? Well, I had that being from the city in a hospital system with the other births. I still realized very quickly that it's still the system. Like I thought that if I was home birthing, I could do it on my terms, by my own clock, have my say. And I very quickly realized that it was basically the hospital system in my home. And I think that was amplified by we were pregnant when it was still COVID-y shit. And so I was very turned off by that. And I think they red flagged me a bit because I refused to wear a mask. And then the midwife would come to my home and I was very, very careful in how I approached the whole schmovid narrative with my children. So when they saw people with masks, and so I didn't like that. I didn't like someone coming in my home with masks. And so I would say something and the midwife would get her back up and I'm just like, I don't want you fucking coming in with a mask, petrified that I'm like, you're red flagging me, you're breathing down my neck and bringing your negative, fearful energy into my home. And also I didn't bond with this midwife. And if it was in a bigger hospital system, like I know with Nash's birth, in a big Sydney hospital, you're just like, I don't like her, and you get given another one. But we were in a small Byron hospital. That was the only midwife available to us. Keshia and I had been allocated the same woman.
My experience was very different though.
Yeah. But I think, there was an abrasion there. And I felt like I was so aware that I still felt like a maiden. And I think, like COVID did, it really awakened so many of us. And I was like, oh my God, I've been so ignorant and I was such a little girl for so long. And that whole 2020 process, 2021 and then 2022, I was finding my like warrior energy. And then I was like, well, sure as shit, I'm not going to let anyone bring me back down to that place of feeling like I'm powerless and they know better than me. I knew it was going to be my final birth. And I was like, this is my last chance to really empower myself in this way, liberate myself in this way, prove to myself that I know better than anyone, than what the government thinks they know of me, of the doctor that thinks they know better of me. And it was a story, it was very much a part of my karma because my whole life I've always been like, everyone knows better than me. You tell me to jump, I'll ask how high. Like I was a very good little girl. And I was ready to change that and rewrite that story. And so then when I was really trying to have this really empowering birth experience, and then I had this midwife really trying to push me down and be like, I know best. And she was like a little bit older, so she was really trying to power trip me in that way. And I'm like, oh, I'm not into it. I'm just not. And that's when Keshia was like, you could just not have her there. I'm like, what? We were at like school drop off. I'm like, what do you mean? Go on. I'm very here for this. Like, and she just, really opened my eyes to, I guess, a really clever way of playing it. And as we said before, we don't know what we don't know. And so I didn't know that you could navigate around this. So yeah, I still played the game in terms of like still stayed within the midwife system, knowing very well that I wasn't going to use them. And so obviously I had to prepare my husband for that, and that was a process too. He was very on board with that, again, because we'd done so much healing over our 7-8 years together by then. But he did have, it was very important for me for him to feel okay with it, because throughout COVID I still felt like I was convincing him to be on my team. And I'm like, I don't want to feel like you're kind of still judging me and thinking that I'm this extreme weirdo who wants to like go against conformity and go against a home birth and all these things. Like, I want you to be on my team. I don't want you to be feeling like you're being dragged. And so he's like, okay, I'm happy to do that. I just need a few things. And so one of the things he wanted to really know was like, what are the red flags to look out for if something were to happen? And so we just watched, like, the Free Birth Society has a big course, and I didn't watch any of it except for that one segment that was like, these are what are considered medical emergencies. And that was really reassuring, because for the most part, they're not really emergencies that need to be dealt with the extreme gravity of how hospital systems birth them. Deal with them, and then also ones to look out for. And so Jess felt prepared in that sense. He's like, cool, okay, I'm feeling good now. And I just reassured him too. I'm like, listen, I'm really not rigid. Like, I'm a very open-minded person, and I'm like, all of us, all mothers, we're not going to willingly put our babies in danger. And so I'm like, listen.
Say it louder.
Like,
louder.
And so I'm like, listen, I know I can do this. I know I can do this on my own. But if I intuitively feel like something's wrong, of course I'm going to fucking call. Yeah, like, of course. Like, I'm not trying to prove myself to the world. It's a karma I need to rectify within myself. But it's also a huge practice for me of listening to my intuition, because for a whole lifetime I silenced that. And yeah, so when we were birthing, and so yeah, I reminded him that I'm just going to go about and birth my baby, and if there are any whispers or nudges or alerts in my body that something is wrong, then of course we're going to make an action to feel that support. But it didn't. Very uneventful. I just my waters broke. I was padding. I just went to Santos with my daughter. We just went to the shops, and she wanted to pat a horse. And so we were patting a horse, and then my waters broke in this field where I was looking at mountains, and I was just like, oh my God, my life's so beautiful. My daughter's being so cute, and I live in paradise, and this is amazing. And I went home, and my husband was having a bath with our son, and I'm like, okay, you should blow up the pool now. And it was just, I was making the kids dinner while I was labouring. And then the moment I knew like I was getting intense was when I was kind of like sitting on the lounge, breathing through it. And my kids jumped up behind me to try and play a game. And I just turned around and went, whoa, and face palmed them. And my son just like was thrown back and looked at me like, I burst into tears. I'm like, I need to go in my cave now. Like I was but beyond the point of like cooking my family dinner to like leave the birthing women alone in her cave. So I'm like, get them to bed. And then, I just labored. Jess and I, we didn't like make huge love like we did last time, but it was very intimate. And a girlfriend was there, not Keshia, another friend who wasn't pregnant, taking photos of my birth. She let us be and hopped in the bath, and it was really intense, much more intense than my second birth, physically and longer, much longer. Nash's birth, I think, was only like 4 hours. And as I said, like the challenging transition part was like half an hour. So it wasn't, and then, the pushing part, the not pushing part, fetal ejaculation.
Ejection.
That's why I could never say it.
That's the real ejection, mate. Ejection. Ejaculation. Reflex ejection.
Don't worry, I always say it in my head too. I'm like, I mean ejection. It's a stupid thing to call it.
Definitely a man coined that term.
But so it was definitely much longer than the Nash's birth. And like he was a big baby. He's an earth sign. Like it was a fire, but like I was really feeling just the heaviness and the intensity. And like I was shaking with every contraction. And I had these like, my salt lamps and my tribal music that I was like feeling like I was in an ayahuasca ceremony. I was just like, oh. And, but there at no point throughout the intensity, throughout the physical sensations, did I ever think I needed someone else. I didn't, no one even came into my head. The only time was when my husband went to fill up the bath water and my hand was empty, and because he was holding it, and then he went to like warm the bath water up, and I was just there, and my girlfriend, the photographer, just swooped in and put her hand there. That's the only thing I required. And that was it. And so it even didn't cross my mind. Like I had to be reminded after I birthed the placenta, that my husband was like, should we call the midwives now? I'm like, oh shit, yeah. Because I didn't, I was already red flagged a little bit. And then we were trying to play the whole, whoops, accidentally had a baby card. But there was none. It was just a normal, intense, but I knew I could hold myself through it. And I also knew that I could birth babies. Like I really do. I don't want to poo-poo women who don't feel like that they're at that stage yet, because I had the confidence, because my other 2 births were very normal and no health complications. So I really don't want, like my biggest pet peeve is infusing shame and guilt into the birthing woman and the birthing world, and I do see a little bit of that. And so, I really don't want to be a part of that at all, but it's just like I knew I could, because I had that historically. And it was, intense. And then like all my babies, no tearing, no anything. I didn't push. I could feel him very strongly, because he was so big. He would like go out and then come back in, and then go out and come back in. And I remember like talking to him. I'm like, what the okay, I see what you're doing here. All right. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Thank you for stretching, mummy. So I didn't tear, and and then he came out, and he was silent for quite a while, but again, really resting in that mother intuition of like, I just knew he was fine. And it took a little while, and I did all the things, tickled his foot, spoke to him, blew in his face, sucked his nose and mouth, and even in that point where there could have been tension, I just, I knew that everything was fine. So
that's actually a point to sit on. Sorry, I'm gonna jump in. With babies, because like I don't think that in a hospital, I've never heard of someone who's like, my baby was born and was, maybe a little bit grayer, or just not as alert or quiet. And I feel like babies that come out like that in the hospital system, they panic when they see that. They're swooped up, they're resuscitated. But I've now been present at 3 births where babies come out and they're a little bit grey. Like my babies have all come out quite pink and screaming. Like they're not. So I've not experienced that. And it wasn't until I was taking photos at these births where 2 of them were home births. 1 of them was a free birth. And and their babies were really quiet, a little bit sleepy actually, a bit floppy to be honest. And I never ever felt panic because the mum was like, this is exactly perfect. And I think there was actually one that was trending on Instagram for a little while where it was
I actually saw something
baby.
recently.
Yeah.
And it was like super floppy and mum was just like, doing her thing. And it's actually interesting because like obviously one of my fears is like going through the
wait before you I'll just finish. But like all these babies have been fine too. Like they're and I think that we haven't allowed it to be normal. But in the births that I have experienced and a few other stories, like anecdotal stories, it seems like that can be normal. And I think that a mum would know if it wasn't.
If she was tapped into her intuition.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing, like where I feel like, and I wasn't really aware of this until after the fact that I had Banjo and he was transferred because he wasn't breathing, that there's a whole primal thing that we've lost between our baby and us when they're born. And even just like breathing on them like a few times and like them having that, your breath and oxygen and everything is just like one of the most basic important things. And just like the connection, the touch, just the touching of like your mouth and just all the things. An animal does that, a cat does that, a dog does that, a horse does it, cow does it. We don't because we've just got our legs up in stirrups and somebody else has got the first.
And think about like a baby that comes out really calm like that and the only energy they're feeling is mum's calm.
Yeah. We still connected, right?
Yeah. And just like, and it's just like, I wonder the programming that comes behind, a baby coming out calm and everyone in a room panicking and there's this mass hysteria over it versus like a baby coming out calm and everyone else is calm. Like what kind of programming does that set you up for in the rest of your life?
I think you touched on a really good point there, Chloe, when you said we spoke about mother's intuition, but you were like, if the mother is connected. And I think that's a really, because like, sure as shit, I was not connected to my intuition with the first time around because I was in fear state. And I do not believe, and again, we were talking about this off air, but, I'm a human design mentor and human design really helped me understand how my intuition speaks to me differently. And it's vastly different to the way it speaks to you. But from what I've experienced, and I guess I would love to hear your feedback, but that you can't be feeling fear and intuition loudly at the same time. And so for me to feel in tune to my baby, I really had to do the work to feel confident and safe to birth and to not be in this head noise of being scared about birth or whatever. And I think that's also just a really important point to make, I guess, for women, how important the work is, the self-work and the understanding yourself in the period of pregnancy so that you can go into not just birth but motherhood feeling very intuitive because
I think like speaking to the fear and intuition piece, because I have a lot of energy usually at the start of the pregnancy, not so much, but usually. And if that goes unused, it turns into anxiety and I can get very heady. And this is just something I know about myself. And so fears do come up for me in all of my pregnancies, no matter what environment I've been in. And I've gone through, 3 pregnancies in the hospital system, 1 in the midwifery group program. And I have to tap in when it comes to fear and intuition because you want that intuition to be strong and it can so be clouded by your fears. So it's really making sure, for me, my experience, it was making sure that I wasn't dissociating from myself, which in my first birth, I am glad that I was in a hospital because I was so dissociated. I would just, you know, like if I felt really strong sensations, I was just like, I'm tapping out of this, like mentally tapping out. Absolutely. Definitely had moments of wanting to be saved. And then I had a whole bunch of moments where I just gave up entirely. And I think it's making sure that, when you're coming at decisions, and I think I share this with a lot of people who are walking that free birth, and even like I've never gone technical wild, like what people would class as wild pregnancy before. But people who are walking that as well, I'm like, I talk about, and we've talked about this with Rhea, like making sure that those decisions come from a really solid foundation, not your rebellious adolescence and not coming from your fear, and making sure that you can, I guess, sift through that. Because, I mean, and I guess it's different for everyone, but in, you know, my last birth, I had lots of little fears come up. And like just before I gave birth to Poet, I was just like, why am I not in a hospital? Why am I not with an epidural in my back? And then she flew out. So,
but it's interesting that you just said that, because like I've heard many women say that when they chose to fully walk the path alone without midwives, got that in my mind because I've just listened to that potty, and, you know, without obstetric care, whatever path you may have walked before, but their birth was significantly harder every time. Like the more they let go and the more they just trusted in themselves, and the more they became more, you know, embodied in that power, the harder physically their birth was, and the mental, like it felt harder. So I don't know, because you said your birth was harder, your last one. Mine was longer when I felt like Birdie's and Pippa's was the easiest, and I had midwife support and I had a hospital backup, whereas the other two didn't have a registered midwife. I didn't have a hospital to go to unless I called an ambulance, and I feel like they were harder. I feel like it was longer, like it was like an all day thing, and then it was weird.
I feel like there are a few things, and I know you are probably going to speak to Yolanda about this, but like physical health, for one. I know I was definitely at my fittest when I had Nash, and it was a reflection. But two, I think it's that whole safety piece. And so bringing in safety, and I speak to this all the time, like when I work with clients, it's like, yes, we expand and we grow, but do it in a safe way. Don't shock yourself into, because you're just going to throw yourself into like fight or flight mode, and then you're not going to be embodied. So like maybe having that whatever you call it, midwife support does bring that underlying level of safety. Or for me, it was like really knowing my husband had my back. I'm like, okay, I am held here. Like, and for the women, we bring whatever we need. I think this is really important. For any women birthing, we bring whatever we need to the table to feel safe. So that you can feel safe in your body enough to let go, because that's what's required to birth. And
yeah, I totally agree with that, because sometimes that isn't being alone in your house while your husband's running around looking after your kids and trying to be and we spoke about this, I think we spoke about this with Rhea, like, I mean, we talk about free birth a lot, but I personally am very for wise women attending births and supporting the mother, like that authentic midwife. And obviously we don't really have them anymore, but there are a few.
There are.
And I think that's a beautiful thing to have, if that's what you need to feel, you know, safe, held, supported.
Yeah. And it's also like, you know, what you were like, I would have gone private midwifery had I could afford it. But the fact was, like, I called around, I'm like, we don't have that money right now. And so I chose to just do it on my own. But I think I know so many women who have, called in their women, and it was like a birthing circle and they held space. And I think that's
incredible.
So beautiful. And I don't think birthing on your own, like, or is better than birthing surrounded by an incredibly wise.
It's really how you feel.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel safe? Do you feel
Yeah.
like you can use your mouth and be like, you need to fuck off right now,
Yeah.
or you need to be here, you need to do that. And I don't know, maybe if we brought that same attitude into a hospital space, if that's where you're birthing, like, you still need to be firmly advocating for like, this doesn't feel good, turn the fucking lights off, you all get out of here, this is what I need, rah. Maybe that's also appropriate. And
Absolutely. And when I was pregnant with Janda, I had a dear friend of mine have a baby who needed medical attention. Like, he wouldn't have survived. It was a very intense birth. And the way she advocated for her and her baby throughout a 6-month hospital journey, because that's how unwell he was, or sick, or whatever you want to term it. But like, she did it. And like, yes, it was less than ideal because she's traumatized from it and she's got some healing to do around it. But like, don't tell me that my birth is like, I'm more better than my friend who just fucking held her ground and told the midwives and the nurses no, and like used her lioness voice. Like, to me, I'm just in awe of her and so many other women who have birthed in very different circumstances. It's all about, I really do think, how the woman walks away and feels within herself after. And that can be done in a hospital, that can be done, you know.
I think it's really good to know yourself, because I've learnt a lot about myself throughout my birthing experiences. So I guess if you're going into this the first time and you're like, I don't know myself, well, I was there too.
you will by the time you're ready to have your 5th baby. Maybe not your first, or your second.
But yeah, like me knowing that, you know, when I'm in a vulnerable position, and birth is that for me, I can't advocate for myself. I can't. I don't want conflict, and I'm a very confrontational person in every other aspect of my life. But when I'm birthing, I do not want to talk to you. I don't want.
But it's not biologically possible. I remember my girlfriend Nadine, who ran the She Births call, she talks, I'm not a sciencey person, but she talks about how the brain works, and that if you are to birth, that part of your brain turns off.
Yeah, it needs to.
It needs to.
And I find, like, I really strongly resonate with that. So I know that if I put myself in a position where there are others around who have an opinion, could influence, whatever that is, I will go along with that. And that will actually happen, you know, in my last pregnancy, where there were things that I felt really strong about. Like, I really didn't want to get my irons tested, really didn't want, but our midwife, who was also very strong, and I have fonder memories of her than you do, but she was really strong and really defiant, and I went into that I don't want to upset you mode, and I was like, and I went and I got my irons checked, but it was a really great lesson for me, because I was like, you know, I really, really liked her, actually. I thought she was great. But you know, there was maybe even a point there where I was like, oh, maybe I will invite her to my birth. I never had the intention to, but I was like, oh, maybe I will get her in. And then once that happened, I was like, absolutely not. Like 100%, absolutely not, because it would have taken a lot less convincing for her wanting to do something or intervene with me in some way, or even just a little, like, planting a little seed in my mind during. And it was a long, you know, if I had have had that birth in a hospital, I would have had intervention. There is absolutely no way I would have had a baby in a natural physiological state. So I think it's knowing little things like that about yourself as well. And I know that my lightness, my fire, is used internally to get my baby out. I didn't want the conflict.
It's good to know that about yourself, though, because you can just prepare as well as
Yeah.
a person who would have the voice. So
Yeah.
Totally.
that's just as productive.
And what you were saying before about like, you know, it comes back to also our individual path and our individual karma. Like this is part of my dharma is trusting myself and believing in myself. Maybe part of your karma is to soften your opinion and soften the way you do approach things. And you doing that with your midwife and being like, oh, okay, I'll go get my iron. That was really incredibly valuable for you. You needed that to happen to evolve you. It all, we all.
Sometimes we resist it, but it's actually what we probably do need, because there's an inner knowing in us that needs to kind of probably unravel, if that makes sense.
I know a lot of women who have had hospital births who were so adamant not to, so adamant. And I'm like, maybe you needed this to soften your opinion on the medical system. And they're like, absolutely I did, because I hated it and I was so anti the medical system, and now I see it for what it's worth and I see that it does. So
It does have value.
yeah.
And like, look, while I bang on about, you know, the industrial medicalized system and all its flaws, and I mean, I've experienced my own trauma in that. My son got a concussion the other day and started vomiting. Where do we go? Straight to the hospital. So it's, you know, there's definitely value there. And I know, especially in my last this pregnancy included and then my last two, I've been really, really careful because, you know, I experienced a lot of hospital trauma with Humphrey's, you know, during the Humphrey's pregnancy. I've been really, really careful to surrender to maybe that's where I'll need to go, and making sure that I am very mentally prepared that if anything did feel wrong, because that's actually a little fear of mine too, like having such a strong like anti-medical stance, and I don't want that to cloud my judgment or my intuition. So yeah, look, I could just harp on about this for days.
But
yeah. But all things to consider. Apologies to our listener who doesn't like me harping on about stuff.
Mate, they wouldn't be here if they didn't. They would not be here if they didn't like hearing your opinions. So, yeah.
So anyway, well, this has been an excellent chat. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, because yeah, it is beautiful. We need to hear these stories. They are so empowering, and it's I think also really great to know that even though you had a you know, standard boring birth with Janda,
That's what you want, people.
yeah, but there's still a lot of work that goes behind that, and there's still a lot of like thought and processes, and you know, when you got to that place, you were able to just sit in the beauty and wonder of it.
Totally. I mean, like, I'm a very deep person. Like, it's always 7 layers deep for me. So in every pregnancy, when there's a little whisper, I'm like, let's unpack that. So like, I did a lot of like work here and here on my soul to get to that point. And yeah, it was the birth I needed, but it's not necessarily what everyone needs. But it was definitely, I'm very grateful that I did that work on myself, that I wasn't afraid of the dark in terms of my internal dark, and that I really listened to my desires of desiring a really empowering birth, and I forged ahead with that, because every woman deserves to have the birth that they know is available to them, and to walk away feeling.
How do you think having a birth like that reflects on like other things in life? Because I feel like there's such a, what's the word? Because brain cells disintegrating by the freaking week over here. Like there's clearly like a mirror of when a woman experiences that type of birth, how she typically experiences other things in her life, be it resolving conflict in marriage, surviving marriage,
Surviving motherhood.
Yeah. Being like stepping into the role of the mother that you actually want to be, versus like, and you know, there's so many of those things, like all of the things that feel so hard in life, like being able to overcome those feels, I imagine it's like, because it is the initiation. It's like you have a birth like that, things feel like a lot easier.
Yeah, it's the ripple effect is infinite.
Yeah.
And I see it, I finally feel like I am embodied in the mother energy that is very grounded and very confident and sure of myself, and I'm not a confrontational person at all. But if it came to it with my children, then look out. And I've only can say that because of how I held myself and proved to myself. And going back to what you were saying before about the stretch, how every birth almost feels harder when you don't have, we get stretched to where we're being called to evolve to, I think. And so when we allow ourselves to feel, it's like I've heard a previous mentor of mine used to call it, if it's scary and exciting, if it's that both of like, oh my God, yes, but also, oh my God, fuck, then we've been stretched to that limit in point in time, and so we know we can handle that.
You know your capacity.
I know my capacity, and I know that I'm of course, like also third time round, fourth time round, fifth time round. Every child you get more and more grounded, more and more calm, more and more.
I don't know.
Really?
Look, I'm approaching this like anything could happen. I could go and decide to have a planned cesarean.
No, but I mean in terms of parenting.
Oh, yeah. Again, I don't know.
Poet's pretty like...
I started off like so aware parenting. Like
Yeah, we've decided
even, like,
that full 50s vibes discipline is where we're at now.
Yeah. Like back to the 1870s.
Whipping.
No, but like with Willow, no one was allowed to say no to her. If anyone said no, I would be like, you're that mum. I was that mum. Like, don't you use negative language around my baby. Then I had because, me and Toggle were like, yeah, we do this perfect, blah, blah, blah. Then we had Humphrey and we're like, didn't do it perfect, lucked out with that one, not with this one. And then found aware parenting, and then was like all about listening to the feelings. But now, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to listen to your feelings. I know you've got them. Can you find another way to switch that around? Because and when it's important, obviously, I'm there, hook, line and sinker. Hook, line, and sinker.
Sinker?
Like center. It's center.
I am not the perfect person for you.
Fucking brain over here. It's okay. Together we make a full brain.
Do we?
Yeah. Nearly. But yeah, my parenting is definitely evolving, and it's coming in more, one, consistency from me, but two, like boundaries around your big feelings, because as they get older too, you actually need to start learning how to hold your own feelings and how to process it and all of that. And it's hard because I've got multiple ages and I bring the energy from
you treat
the
your
first
2-year-old
year.
like your 8-year-old. You're like, shit, sorry. I mean, I can't cater for everyone. Look at you. There's 5 of you.
Not yet.
That's also like
got a little time.
I'm getting used to saying it.
it's their karma, because Poet's gonna be like, oh, I fucking hate that I've said karma that many times, because I feel like people are eye rolling me.
It's okay because they can do drinking games and karma can be there.
But like also, when you were saying about, you don't have time for the emotions, that's also bringing the fucking humanness to it. Like I know I'm a great parent, but I also I never thought I would say this, but like tell my kids to stop crying. When I've I have courses on using human design as a conscious parenting tool, and I tell the emotional, and I'm like, tell the parent of the emotional child to like validate their feelings. I also sometimes I'm just like, shut the fuck up. But guess what? I circle back around and I'm like, hey babe, I'm really sorry I said that before. Mummy's also human and I'm feeling my emotions too. Like I think you expect perfectionism with your first two, and then you slowly realize that the way you mother your children, you've also got to mother yourself. And so you're like, oh babe, it's okay, you fucked up there, but it's okay. Just the same way you're like, oh, you bumped your knee, let me cuddle you,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, on that note, where can people find you, especially if they are more interested in human design?
Hear karma all the time. I play mostly on Instagram, Kim Sexty _ Sexty is my surname. And yeah, I do.
It's a great surname, BT Dom.
You know what they used to say in primary school?
I bet all good things.
Is your middle name isn't?
Aww.
And I was like 8. And I'm like, what? What does that even mean? I know.
Well, right now, absolutely. I'm 8.
You creepy pervert.
Like, what's wrong with the 8-year-olds?
But yeah, so on Instagram, and yeah, like of course I do human design readings and workshops and how we can use, and classes on how we can use human design to bring awareness to parenting, but also really liberating our true selves and empowering our true selves. But I also do mentoring and other things. I'm not just about human design. It's just a great tool.
And you're an awesome person to talk to. So if anyone needs some mentoring, Kim's your lady.
Thanks, babes.
All right. Well, thanks again, Kim. This has been an awesome chat.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll sign off. Ciao, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.